This week on the podcast, hailing from Iceland, we welcome elite athlete and coach Blaine McConnell. Throughout the episode, we talk about the ease of programming after your principles are in place, the culture around strength training internationally, getting athletes to buy into the program, and creating an atmosphere that breeds awesome training. Follow Blaine on Instagram at blaine.mcconnell and enjoy the episode.
Before we hit the intro music, I wanted to introduce to you guys the Yoakum Strength Insider. The Yoakum Strength Insider is our online training platform that takes all of the ideas that we talk about on this podcast and implements them into a program that is available to you at the touch of your fingers. Our goal with the Yoakum Strength Insider is to create better movers, to level up your life, and to move forward from where you are. We do this in a holistic fashion. Not only will you receive a program that has helped hundreds of people become better movers, you'll also receive access to our app that allows you to track everything, has video links for all exercises, and allows you to be in constant communication with a Yoakum Strength coach. Along with this, you'll get our 30-page PDF nutrition and lifestyle guidelines. That includes everything from what to eat, how much of it to eat, why we're eating it, meditation habits, and other lifestyle habits that we implement with our clients to really level up their lives. If you're interested in trying out one of these programs, use podcast 25 in the discount section right before you pay for 25% off your first program. Boom.
This is the Yoakum Strength Podcast. Take the leap down the rabbit hole with us as we interview elite level guests to unravel what high performance really is.
Dude, fucking pumped to have you on the podcast. Let's go. We got the story, Poppy, on the podcast. I'm excited to have you here. We're trying to get you on the Meathead round table, but you are like 100 hours time difference away from
Dude,
us.
that time difference screws up a lot of opportunities like that. So
Bro,
it's all good.
You and Angus are both like on the other side of the world.
Yeah, that's one of the downfalls of being out here in Iceland, but all
How is
good.
what is give me some positives for Iceland. How is Iceland over there? I honestly like I'm pretty geographically challenged and like am not very cultured in like the Icelandic world. Like what's it like over there?
Dude, it's chill. Like the way of life in Iceland is just super chill. Like
Really?
their national motto is "Þetretas," which translates literally to "It will be fine." Like
That's super nice.
that's exactly, and that's how they live their life. Like there's not a lot of stress out here. It's real chill. Most people like full-time jobs are like 30 hours a week. So like people get paid really well and don't have to spend their life doing a 9 to 5 type stuff. So like the stress level for most people here is just really chill, other than the fact that it's just dark and cold for like 7 months, 8 months out of the year. It's a dope place to live.
What is that? Because I had an intern come over from Italy, and he was saying the tough thing about strength conditioning in Italy is because the culture's so laxed, it's hard to like push a strength conditioning culture that like you really have to like almost mold your strength conditioning culture to the Italian culture. Whereas he's like, when he said he came to America, he was like, this is the best thing ever. Everybody's like, go, 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 so we can just get after the weights. And he's like, it's really hard to motivate kids and like all of his friends. It wasn't even kid, like it was his friends and his peer groups to actually like put weight on the bar or do anything like that. What's that been like for you? Like trying to do stuff there, strength conditioning
Dude,
wise.
one of the big reasons I had to move online was because Iceland's strength and conditioning culture almost doesn't exist.
Mm.
So they specialize very early on. Like there's no school teams, which I think is a big downfall for the majority of European like sports and development, is that everything is club. So these club teams make money by having these kids participate in their sport. And the way that they continue to make money is you get kids that are playing soccer at 5, 6, 7 years old, and then they end up only playing soccer ever. So
Hmm.
they have very early specialization. They have very early mindsets of like, we need to get good at this sport. So like that general preparation of being able to not only just play multiple sports, develop different movement patterns and coordinations, and have like some sort of progression where you're going from like, here's a GPP style traditional training model where you're just going to go in and just try to basically get as strong as you possibly can, and then go specialize later on once you've matured to a level where you can pick two sports that you really want to focus on and then maybe narrow that down to one when you're like 18, 19 years old or whatever it might be. They're specializing from like first grade. They have their one sport that they enjoy doing, and then they just do that forever. It's really hard to break into that because these coaches don't understand strength and conditioning. They don't understand like the benefit of having that in direct line with the sport development side. And like their strength and conditioning for a lot of the club teams here, like whether it be handball, even the basketball team, the soccer team, all that kind of stuff, they just go to the gym. They do like these circuits twice a week, and that's literally all they do. Like they have almost a elementary level style of training out here where there's very little development for like groups as a whole, where the only people who really end up developing are like the guys who are just genetically gifted to be good at sport.
Dude, it is actually wild. Like I realized this recently where it's like I think strength conditioning is like totally changed and it's like everybody like knows everything that we talk about and when we're doing and I'm like, oh, it's just a massive echo chamber. You leave that at all. And again, having the intern from Italy where he was telling me the same thing where it's like, dude, he showed me some of the programs and some of the stuff they're doing. I was like, what? How is that still a thing in 20 like it looks like a like 1960s like almost like pop class, like lifetime, like kick class, like where they're like going like this through circuits, and but it's for their athletes. It's not for like some 90-year-old woman. It's like the athletes are trying to make professional athletes. I'm like, how is this still a thing?
Dude, it blows my mind. I had a one of the coaches I was talking to out here he's one of the coaches on a soccer team. They were talking about training, and he was like, emailed me a week of what their workouts looked like, and they had a speed day where they were like the focus of this day was to do sprints. They were doing like 10 60 or 60-meter all out sprints with like 2 minute rest in between. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, first off, one or two 60s is going to blow up anything if you're doing it at 100%, let alone giving yourself 2 to 3 minutes in between each of these maximum effort 60. So like their mindset on like, at least their understanding of what they think they're doing is just, it's so far off of like what could be happening out here. But it's just the culture that like it's always been like that here. And it's really hard to break in and try to change anyone's mind when it comes to the strength and conditioning side.
So you mentioned on Tim's podcast how you had I don't know if it was like an Uber Eats driver, somebody came to your house, they recognized you, right?
Yeah.
Have you noticed any influence of like change from your like Instagram and YouTube of like has anybody adopted what you're doing to be because of the Instagram and YouTube? Like yesterday, this is a good example. Like yesterday, I saw three high school kids strapping up their lat pull downs and rows, and I'm like, oh, they just watched Sam Sulek on Instagram, like or on YouTube. Like that's just straight Sam Sulek. Like they haven't thought about that. They didn't come up with that idea. Like Sam just told them to do it and they did it. Have you seen any of that where like they're starting to adopt it just because it's like because I think I Will talks about like how it's like you don't want to try and be an influencer, but like when you're just a freak, like that's one of the best ways to like actually change people's minds. It's just like live the life that you're talking about and like show them like undeniable results. Has that worked at all in the culture? Or is it like so ingrained it's almost impossible?
No, I've seen a lot more of that. I get tagged in a lot of stuff from people specifically in Iceland. A
That's
lot of
awesome.
a lot of these guys who are on these teams, whether it's the basketball team, the soccer team, like they've bought my programs and just went and did the workouts on their own because they don't have any sort of like structured training regimen within their team sport. They basically just practice and that's it. And it's funny if you go into any gym in Iceland and you see anybody doing any sort of like plyometric or jump, they immediately associate with, oh, they're following one of my programs.
That's awesome.
Like anything, especially if they're doing like a seated box jump or a seated broad jump or anything like that, they're like, oh, okay, he's following one of Blaine's programs because he's the only other person in Iceland we know that does this.
That's kind of sick.
It
What
was funny that one of my buddies here owns a Brazilian jiu-jitsu gym, and he was in the gym, he was doing box jumps, and another guy, he's an older guy, so like he's been beat up. Obviously, jujitsu just tears you up. So, but he's in there doing jumps, and one of his friends walks by him at the gym, and he's like, "You're like Blaine from Timu."
that's a compliment and an insult at the same time.
what's your setup like right now? Like, what's the is that your gym that you're currently in? That thing's kind of badass. I kind of like that little like it's kind of like a dungeon atmosphere, like an upgraded dungeon. I love it.
No, it's not my gym. I owned a gym out here for a while and then I
Okay.
ended up selling. The gym that I train in right now is like a club lifting team. So it's all the clubs out here, like one of the big clubs out here is called KA, and that club has handball teams, basketball teams. So they also have a powerlifting and a weightlifting team, and this gym is a part of that powerlifting club. So anyone can essentially join this gym and train. But I went to this one because I was like, you guys got all the stuff I need. I can train 24 hours a day. It's just a key code to get in through the door, which is great. But it's just the guys who run this place are just straight up meatheads. They love powerlifting. That's all they care about. So it's like it's one of those atmospheres. It's not like a 24-hour fitness or anything. Like you go in here and it's dirty, it's grungy. They still have really nice equipment though. People are in there just hammering it and getting after it, which is a lot of fun. And then the track that I train at is an indoor track that's right next to the indoor football field. So it's open to the public, and as long as I think from like 7 in the morning until 9 at night, you can just go in there and train and do whatever you want.
Dude, that's the setup. Trying to find a track here indoors in Minnesota is so impossible. We have it's like negative 20 degrees today. Like everything is just packed.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually me and then probably 20 to 30, 60 to 70 year olds just walking laps.
Doing the walks, yeah. What's
Yeah.
when you're at your gym, it looks like when you're making YouTube videos, it looks like it's usually pretty empty. How does that like do you get like times or is it you just go when nobody's there?
I usually am in there when no one's there because when
Yeah.
I'm training, it's like if I'm in the gym doing any sort of strength work, it's between 9 and noon. And most of the people who also train there are working all day. So when it gets to about 4 or 5 o'clock, then there'll probably end up being a lot more people in there. 90% of the time when I walk in the door, it's me and maybe one other person that's in there training.
Yeah, I was gonna say it looks that's why I thought it was like your place because there's like the super like all the cool equipment and then it was just you in there. I was like, dude, that's what I want. Like I was like, I need your YouTube studio that you got. I've been ripping. I got my gym, I share it with like this soccer space. So like we got certain times during the day. Like when I have my athletes in there, it's all ours. But when I'm like making videos, usually there's like a soccer team in there and it's so loud. I'm like, dude, we're trying to like make this video. And then the other spot I go to is just like a public lifetime gym. And that place is like yesterday I was there and there was two high school kids that just kept trying to make like they wanted to make it into video, but without like talking to me. So like they like followed me around the whole gym and like were like peeking their head in. I was like, dude, I like told them at the end, I'm like, dudes, if you want to come in, like just come in, like I'll get you on the mic. I don't care. And they're like, no, we're good, we're good. It's like whatever. One of the things that I love about your training and kind of background is seems like you have a kind of side quest approach to fitness. Like you see on the right behind you, you have Unit Combine 2.0, right? Like you have so many little side quests that you're doing. And for me, especially for me, like my personal training, like if I don't have a side quest goal, training is just like fucking brutal for me, dude. Like if I don't have something, whatever it is, like learn how to do a backflip, softball, like clean, jerk, like snatching, whatever it is, like I need some small, like little side quest. What are those like side quest approach like for you? Like how do you come up with like creating those? How does that motivate you? Like why do you do them? Like what's kind of that journey like for you?
Dude, just figure out things within the areas that I like to train that I feel I can improve on or that I feel are lacking compared to where they used to be in the past. And I'm juggling these things around all year. So right now, at the beginning of last year, I did like the unit combine, which is kind of a parody of the NFL combine. So we do like a 40-yard dash, a broad jump, and then we max out the power clean, the bench press reps, max out some variation of squat. So I'm doing like the second rendition of this year. But after the program was finished last year, I just started figuring out different things that I wanted to do. One was like I went through like a vertical jump phase where I was just trying to get back to a 40+ inch vertical. One of the things was running the 60 meters and just timing that out and figuring out like flying tens or whatever it is. But I've always been so enamored with like the bigger, faster, stronger type thing. Like that's always been kind of my main interest when it comes to training, not just being big, not just being fast, not just being strong, but trying to blend those together as well as possible. So some aspect of those is always going to be in my training. And I literally just get random ideas and be like, all right, you know what? I haven't tried to max out my front squat and run a 4.40 at the same time. Let's see if we can do that. Let's see if I can hit 450 on a front squat and run a 4.4, and I just get ideas and start putting stuff together and see if it works. A lot of times it doesn't. Either one of them ends up being horrible and the other one ends up being great. But I learn a lot along the process and go, okay, I would change this up. So a lot of things I did in the last combine program that I did beginning of last year, I've changed that this year, and I'm going through it now and trying to figure out like, all right, not only do I like the goal is I want to run a 4.35 40, but I also want to power clean 200 kilos, and I also want to bench press 30 reps on 225. So it's like, is this even possible? And then if it is, let's just send it and see how it goes. And then something's going to pop up towards the end of this program where I'm going to be like, you know what? That's the next thing I'm going to do. And it's really, it just comes and goes. I get an idea. I write it down like in my notes on my phone. I probably have 8 to 10 different ideas on like what I'm going to do after this next program I'm doing right now is over. So whatever interests me the most at the time is probably what I'm going to hop on doing.
Dude, and that one of the things that you're kind of like getting to is that you're just doing and trying and learning from that, and like that's your scientific approach. And like in the age of how much information we have, and I feel sorry for like a lot of these high schoolers, because if I was growing up in this age of information, I would fucking struggle too, because like it's like fuck, am I supposed to do this program? Am I supposed to do this program? Like what is right? And I would jump so much, but one of the things that you talk about, and I try to like get the high schoolers to understand, is like you're not going to know until you do. Like you're not going to know where your program is wrong until you actually finish Combine 1.0, and then you're like, okay, I need to work on more max capacity on my bench press, right? Like my strength levels were good, but like I was gassing out, or I need to add more size or whatever it is. But like then you can actually change that for the next time, and that's the beauty of it. It's like when you're just like doing and getting after the first program, regardless of if it's perfect or not, right? Like, let's say that the bench press is the one that took a hit. All these other numbers still went up, right? Like, you still made a lot of progress in all these other things while you were learning all this stuff. And then for the next program, you make slight tweaks, and then you can make all the progress again, right? But it's like this constant learning through doing that I think has kind of been lost a little bit in the social media world of training, where it's like we just want to learn and we want to do everything right perfectly right away. And I just made a post on this yesterday where it's like it was inspired by Will's rant on should you focus on technique versus weight. But it's like, to me, it's like if you just pursue the weight and your goal is actually weight, like your goal is just like, let's say a 500-pound squat, right? If you just squat and pursue that heavy weight, like eventually your technique is going to have to clean up, right? Like it's your limiting factor for that goal. Whereas if you focus on the pretty and the smart and the like clean thing, it's not necessarily going to lead to that goal. Whereas if you're just getting after it and learning through doing, which I just feel like it has been so butchered and lost. And I think a lot of it has to come down to like the scarcity mindset a lot of coaches have, where they kind of sell these shiny tokens. They kind of sell these shiny programs to kids. And I have a kid right now that's like, he's this baseball kid that basically like he has like some wrist issue, but he's not doing any training, but fucking just wrist curls all day long because his PT sold him that these wrist curls are going to get his exit velo up. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck are we talking about? But like the PT, I don't know. I feel like there's no way the PT actually fucking thinks that, right? Like that has to be like okay, the only way to get him money is to tell him these special exercises is going to work. And it's like, that kid just needs to be like hex bar deadlifting and like doing something explosive and like something athletic, but we're not doing it anymore, man. We're not learning through doing.
There's too many. I agree with that 100%. I think there's too many kids now that are getting interested in becoming a coach or developing themselves on the strength and conditioning side where they want answers, they don't want direction. They just want to be
Mm.
told this is going to work if I do it. They don't want to be like given the principle of what you should do and explore that principle in a way where it's like, okay, let's just figure this out following this principle of whatever it might be, progressive overload or developing power on XYZ, and see how that translates to something else. They're just like, tell me what to do and tell me it's going to work, and I'll do that. And that will be my experience because I'll go through the training and I'll do it versus give me a guide that starts me off here and at least points me in the direction that I want to go and let me figure out some ways to get there. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but that direction will teach you way more than if I just say, follow this exactly and XYZ is going to happen.
Yeah, dude. And I get this question every week that I post a Q&A. It's like best advice for a strength coach that's in college, best advice for like a young coach. It's like to me, honestly, and I know this is a meathead answer, but the best advice for me is like go join a sports team and try to get good at that sport. Like
Dude, 100%.
there's just no better way to learn. Like I think when we were talking about like I think right now too many coaches are wanting to be coaches too quick, or like too many coaches want to be like the high level influencer too. It's like put yourself through the trenches, like actually put yourself through the trenches, whatever that trench is. I'm not saying you have to go play American football like I did. Like pick a trench. Maybe it is just powerlifting or Olympic lifting. Maybe it is some bodybuilding thing. But I just think I actually got this piece of advice from one of my mentors when I was growing up, and he was talking about how he became a head coach too quickly. And he was like making all this growth and learning under people, and then he made the jump to become a head football coach too quickly. And when he became a head football coach, then it switched from learning to like having to actually lead and do it, and he felt like it stunted his growth. And from there, he went back to be an OC, and when he went to back to be OC, he like doubled his growth and became a much better coach, and then was actually ready to become a head coach. And I think a lot of times we are trying to rush the journey of becoming a coach, rush the journey of, I don't even know if it's becoming a coach. Like, it doesn't seem like, why would you want to rush the journey of being a strength conditioning coach? It's not like a super sexy job, you know? Like, I don't really get it. Maybe it's like wanting to be the influencer type thing, but it's like, dude, go do a sport. Go do like pick a task that you want to pursue. Maybe it is just a 400-pound clean. Like, go pursue something like that. That is going to teach you so much more about strength conditioning than anything in your classes is going to. At least in my head.
Dude, I do the same thing. Like every time I do my Q&As, I always get questions about like what were the most influential books or whatever, some sort of question along those same lines. And I'm like, dude, the books don't do anything if you don't have experience to go along with it. Like you could read triphasic training and you might love it, and then you go try it, you might actually hate it. You don't, maybe you
Dude,
don't
that was
like
me.
doing,
That
yeah,
was
maybe you don't like doing eccentrics and the isos into overcome, like whatever it might be. Maybe you end up reading West Side and you love West Side way more than you did when you were doing triphasic, and you actually are more bought into a system. You actually enjoy doing it. You're going to have more experience with what works, what doesn't work, and that's going to develop you a lot more than just saying this book was the most influential book because X whatever reason it might be. Because nothing beats the experience, like you said, of like being in the trenches for one, but then also fucking shit up and getting things wrong and knowing for a fact I didn't like this variation. So let's find something else that could substitute for that so I can get better next time.
Dude, so my sophomore year of college, I read triphasic, and we had a strength conditioning program, and I was like, we are so stupid for not running triphasic. Like this is obviously the magic answer. Like I just read
Yes.
this. Like this is the best fucking book ever. Sophomore year, our coach leaves. Junior year, we don't have a strength coach because we're Division III college. Like we didn't have a strength coach for that year. It's a total shit show. Like they were having us lead lifts and stuff like that. It was wild. Wild West out there. So I ran triphasic myself, ran like to the T. And I was like, this sucks. And that's not to say triphasic itself sucked, but just for me, I'm like, I did not like it. I didn't get great results. I didn't feel amazing for it. I'm not super great at like massive deloads into a peak. Like my body just never feels good with that stuff. And I got finished and I'm like, oh my God, like it was just like the magic of the book is what I thought was the best part about this program. And then I actually ran it to a T for like 24 weeks straight and I didn't love it. Like I was like, but I would have never learned that lesson if I had just sat there reading the book. And then, and this is what I think a lot of times happens is coaches will read the book and then just program for their athletes, right? Like, and it's like, there's a
And they
massive
have
disconnect
no
there. You'll never
clue
know.
on what's going on because they've never experienced it themselves.
Exactly.
Dude, I feel like at some point, every strength and conditioning coach has gone through a triphasic phase where they were like, all right, we're going to do eccentrics, isos, and then French contrast and peak and dealer, all that kind of stuff. And then a lot of strength and conditioning coaches go into a West Side approach. But it's like reading something and just implementing it for others is such a shot in the dark because you have absolutely no clue because you've never done it yourself. You're essentially doing a giant experiment on whether or not what you read is going to transfer over to these kids. But I had the same experience. I didn't last 24 weeks. I think I made it through probably 8 to 12 weeks of doing triphasic, and I was like, this is stupid. I'm not doing this anymore. This is I hate everything about this. I don't feel like I'm getting better. I had the same experience with like the deload into the peak. And that's something that like if I'm going to go into a peak and try to test out numbers and see something, I've learned through experience that I don't do well with deloads. Like I
Same.
can't deload prior to a peak. I need to maintain intensity. The amount of intensity that I'm going to get might be a lot lower than if I'm just training hard. So like rather than doing multiple sets at maximum effort, this or that, maybe I'm just doing one to just keep the CNS firing and trying to keep things going so I can go into my test and feel really good. But every single time I've ever deloaded and tried to go into a test, like thinking that I'm rested, I've always felt like shit. And then I wouldn't have never known that had I have not learned it. And then implement that with people who follow my programs or are doing my training. It's just compounded, and everyone said the same thing. It was like, oh, why are we lifting so heavy this day prior to doing a test? I'm like, trust me, it's going to work. I've done it myself. Versus, trust me, it's going to work. Well, I read about it. Let's see if it happens.
Dude, I was a hammer thrower in college, and it was because obviously like deloads weren't super big in football. Like they were never, it was just never big around the culture. Like we were kind of just training throughout. And I always felt really good. Like I literally like I just felt strong. You know, like where you're like feeling the ground and you feel strong, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in track, like they always like these coaches just always told me like you need the deload for, and it was like a long ass D. It was almost like a week and a half to 2 week deload before like our big meets. And every time I was like, dude, I feel horrible. Like I feel bad. Like, and I told them that. They're like, no, just trust me. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. And I was
Dude,
like, all right. And like, and at that
that's
time, I
the
was just
Charlie
believing.
Francis.
Yeah, dude. And I was just believing. I was like, all right, let's do it. And for 3 years straight, I was like, this isn't working. And I couldn't, like, I had no, I couldn't like fight it because I'm like, these coaches know what they're doing, obviously. And now looking back on it, I was like, no, they didn't. They didn't know what the fuck they were doing. I just trusted them because you should be able to trust your coach. I was like, they were just literally either, and that's the thing. Like, I don't want to throw like shade on it because maybe it worked for them, but like working for them is way different than working for your athletes. But like, that's what I think a lot of coaches like struggle with. It either like worked for them or they never tried it. Those are two very like common things. But I think a lot of times if something works for you as a coach and then you have data points that it's not working for your athletes, it's like, okay, there's a data point right in front of us that like we should pay attention to. But anyways, that whole deload thing was tough. But one of the other things that I want to talk about too is like when you're reading sources, like how many times have you posted something? You posted an exercise, you posted a post, like whatever it is, and somebody takes it and they reply or they ask you like, did you mean this or like this? And you're like, no, not at all. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? So like even when you have triface, because I've met Cal a couple times. Cal is actually a mad genius. Like I think I have mad respect for Cal. I've been in his weight room. I've seen him get unbelievable fucking results. And it's like, so not only do you have the issue of like the information just being wrong, but the information can be completely correct. And either it's a bad communication in how they deciphered it from their brain to the book, or how you deciphered it from the book to like real life. And I think that's something that's not talked about enough either. It's like, it doesn't, because I think so many people just struggle with like saying something doesn't work when it's from a good coach, from an authority figure. And I'm like, I'm not saying Cal's dumb at all. I think Cal's a fucking genius that gets amazing results. I'm saying what I took from that book and what most people take from that book doesn't work in real life, right? Or doesn't work in the settings that we're applying it. That doesn't mean it doesn't work in his setting too, you know? Like, and I think that's a big piece. And again, I've seen it in my own post where like I'll post something, somebody will say like this or like I tried this. I'm like, no, not at all. That is not what I meant. Either I communicated that poorly or you read that poorly because that is not what we were talking about at all there.
That happens a lot too. Also, not only is it interpreted wrong from people, and I think a lot of times people are trying to read between the lines too much.
Mm,
Like they're trying to see what you're saying and go a little bit deeper than what you actually meant it to be. Like for example, I was been doing seated box jumps for the last couple of weeks from a very deep position, and people have been asking me like, what specific reason are you going from this? Is it for acceleration? Like, no, I'm squatting and I'm jumping. I just chose to do this variation. There's no
it's the box
specific
I
reason.
had.
Yeah, it's like there's no other secret thing that I'm keeping in the back of my mind that this is going to help with, other than the fact that it's like I just did a bunch of box jumps, this variation for the last 6 weeks prior, and I wanted to change it up. That's it. And that's whether the box is high, whether the box is low, whatever it might be. I'm literally just squatting and jumping, and you can interpret it as, oh, he's just doing a strength movement followed by some sort of power development movement. Like it's not like the specifics of the depth of my strength, and the specifics of the depth of this box jump are going to transfer over to me being able to run a faster 20-meter dash prior to my four, like whatever it might be. So I think people read into things so deeply when it's really just surface level stuff a lot of the times. And I try to post with like surface level explanation because there isn't a whole lot of needed depth to go into certain things just because it's not there. And if we realize that most of the stuff we do in the gym is just to build up qualities, not to build up specific things that are going to transfer over to your sport, then it's just like, look, this is going to help you get stronger and more powerful, regardless of whatever it is that you're trying to do in terms of play. It's just squat and jump, or it might be hinge and run, or whatever it might be. I think people just dig way too deep into things sometimes, thinking that like there's more to it than this. It's got to be more complex because sports science tells me that there's studies that do this, and this. And it's like, no, it's not. It's just lift something heavy and then jump after it. That's literally what I'm doing.
Dude, and like I just got that. I just went off on rants about that, about like why do I have so much variation in like my own programming? It's like, cause I've been in a weight room for too long and I get bored if like I need a different stimulus. Like it's just for me. Like it's literally just for me because it's something fun or something cool. Like I like that jump variation. I was watching you do it. I was watching Will do it. I wanted to try it, like that's all that was. And again, it's like all I wanted, the goal of that day was like a horizontal jump variation or a vertical jump variation, and then I plugged and played from there. But there was no like massive reasoning. But again, I also draw myself back to, let's say, 6 years ago when I was in college. I would have looked at your videos and thought the same exact thing they're thinking. Like it it takes a lot of data points, and this is why I try to emphasize and talk about the same things over and over again, because it takes a lot of data points to get people out of that indoctrinated process of like the college CSCS type route where you are told all of those small details matter. And for a long time, it's almost like to boxing. Like it makes athletes way too hyper focused on small things that do not matter. And that was me 100%. I was so focused on these small things. And it took a long time of just providing details and providing data points to myself over and over again. It was like, okay, not only are you getting better results now, but you feel better and working out is more fun. And like, I will still have all these data points of like, I'm feeling better, working out's more fun. I'm less stressed about my workouts. I'm less super specific about my workouts. I have all these data points to prove it's right. And I still will like drop like, well, fuck, but I'm supposed to be specific. I'm supposed to like, I have all these thought processes of like, it's supposed to be super scientific though, right? And it's like, yeah, but there's a balance there. And like trying to get kids out of that thought process. And again, especially in America, dude. Like Iceland too, but like the obesity pandemic in America, it's like, dude, if we could just get kids in the fucking gym working out at all consistently, like 4 days a week, that's such a win, such a win. And we focus on so many crazy things. It's like that does not matter, man. You obviously don't work with these kids because that like not once has that mattered to them.
Yeah, I've recently gone on this phase where I almost reject sports science because of that. Like, I was talking to a friend the other day about this, and I was like trying to explain. I was like, look, like the measurables are important. The science on why you do things is important, but the specifics of like exercise science is really it's just principles because it's not a like I went on this whole rant about like exercise science isn't a real science. It's not chemistry. It's not like when you build a paper mache volcano and you put in baking soda and vinegar, that baking soda and vinegar is going to react to each other the same way no matter what. Whether it's me in Iceland doing it, whether it's you in Minnesota, like no matter what, that baking soda and vinegar is the exact same response every single time. Exercise does not work that way because every human is so different than the other that maybe I do a certain progression that was written out in some science article and I did it the exact same way and I got 5% better. That doesn't mean that you're going to get 5% better. Maybe you only get 3, maybe you get 7, but it's not the exact same response for every single person because every single person is so different biologically and their stress and adaptation to certain things, whether it be the same exact sets and reps or whatever, is also going to be different because every person is so vastly different from the other that you got to look at the sports science things of it's just principle based. If you look at a study and you just go, rather than saying like the specifics of doing 5x5 back squats at this percentage twice a week is going to increase your back squat 1RM by 15%. If you just go, okay, look at the principle of there's some sort of progressive overload, there's some sort of fatigue management, so they're not just burying themselves into the ground, and then there's some sort of time where there's recovery and adaptation. If you just look at it a scope a little bit broader, that's what exercise science provides. It doesn't provide exact models for how this and that. And so many people are so hung up on the exercise science part where it's like science based this, science based that, but it's not exact. It's more here, like I said before, it's like it's just a direction to follow down, but it's not going to be the exact same outcome for every single person that ever does it, regardless of anything else.
Dude, that's such a good fucking rant. That was a money rant right there. It's not a real science. And the thing I've been ranting about recently is even if it is a real science, like most of these sports scientists are not as good as scientists as they think they are, right? Like
No.
they're not as good at fixing technique as they think they are. They're not as good at spotting flaws as they think they are. Like there was a one cool study. I had a ultra running coach on, and he brought it was like a study of they brought on I think it was 10 coaches of each level. So like 10 novice coaches, 10 advanced coaches, 10 expert coaches in quotation based off the level of athletes they worked on. And they showed them, I believe, I'm probably butchering the study, but you'll get the general gist of it. They showed them like running forms, right? And they had each of these coaches like pick apart the form, right? And they showed no and like based off this running form, how fast did this runner run? Was that runner elite? Like what were they seeing? And basically what they proved is the coaching eye is not like it wasn't a fucking real thing based off of it. Like the expert level coaches were no different than the beginning level coaches. And the only difference was the level of confidence in that coach's prediction on how fast that athlete was. Where the beginner coach was like, fuck, I really have no idea. Where the expert coach is like, no, that guy's fast, that guy's slow. And it's like, so we had like we're not as good as we think we are at it. So like if we are not as good at that part of it, at the super small detail part of it, and we're pretending we are, it's like maybe we need to get better at the other stuff, which is like just again getting them to show up to the gym, getting them to bring intensity. Because again, I look at it as like a kind of a data point game is that like if you can get them in the gym regardless of if you're doing all the right things or not, regardless if you're picking up on let's all the right sprinting form or not, if you just get them to show up to the gym and have them sprint 3 times a week or twice a week, like you're allowing them to kind of figure it out and giving them more potential to like have these things figured out, right? So like even if you're not as good of a scientist, you're just giving yourself more potential to become a better athlete or become a better coach because your athletes are becoming better. And I think a lot of times we just a lot of coaches just listening to these like form experts on like social media, it's like we think we are way smarter than we are and we're not getting the results that we think we are. And then I think that's the end of the day thing. It's like if you are actually as correct as you are putting out there, like you should be able to produce Olympians on Olympians on Olympians, and that's just never the case, right? Like there's no like, and like what you were saying, where it's like it's not a real science. Like if it was a real science and we actually had the answer, right? Like there would be one gold standard program by this point, right? Like and people
Dude, if
think there's one gold standard program, but there's fucking not. Like there's so many expert level athletes that are following thousands of different programs, right? So like there's obviously not like a squared plus b squared equals c squared in our field.
no, there's that's the example I use as well. Is like if the exercise science of things was so exact, then somebody would be making billions because that would be the
Yes.
only program anyone would ever run because we know for a fact it's going to turn you into an Olympian or it's going to turn you into a all pro running back at the NFL or whatever it might be. But it doesn't exist because that program might be great for one person. It might be shit for another. Like you said with triphasic, like you didn't like it. My experience also wasn't was that I didn't like it. But obviously Cal has got a pedigree of athletes that he has worked with and used that system, and they have become monsters and they have become Olympians. But it doesn't mean that it's going to turn every single person that does that into an Olympian. So this along the same lines that you were saying is like that science aspect of things, that gold standard program, it's not there because there's so much variance in everything that we do that the buy-in is more important than the program. So like getting the kids to show up to the gym is more important than what you actually do. My first job when I had my first strength and conditioning job was I went back to my old high school and I got hired as the strength and conditioning coach for the football team. And we did awful programs. Like we'd had way too much volume. We were doing stupid exercises, but the kids had so much fun and everyone was showing up that everyone got better. And it wasn't because the program was elite. It was because the atmosphere that we created was elite. And I said this on the Coach 'em Up podcast with Tim is like, we also did that when I lived at the Olympic Training Center with the bobsled team. The reason why we all were able to get better is because we created an elite program in the gym in terms of like the atmosphere that we created, how much fun we had showing up and training. Everyone just showed up. Everyone was doing different stuff. We all had different coaches. Some people were doing Olympic lifts. Some people never did Olympic lifts. And some people were doing plyos. Some people never did plyos. But the standard was you're going to show up, you're going to work hard, you're going to be with the boys, you're going to have a good time, and everyone's going to get better. And that's what worked. It wasn't the specifics of the program. It wasn't the sets and reps. It wasn't the exercise selection. It wasn't how specific is this movement towards the pushing of a bobsled. It was we showed up at 2, 3 o'clock every single day. First thing we did, we went to the basketball court. We just played basketball for 30 minutes and warmed up. And then we walked into the gym, cranked the music, and we all just had a great time lifting weights.
Dude, that's fucking awesome. The getting together with the boys like that's principle number one in S&C. Like when Tristan's at his class right now, like that's what they should be preaching. Like how do you get a bunch of boys together to get after it? What are your principles like when you are approaching a program? Because I think to me it is incredibly freeing right now to think about this, like where it's like not a lot specifically matters, right? Like right now, and that for me that's super freeing of like, okay, as long as I have my principles in place, I can go and do what I kind of feel like doing that day, in a sense of like I can adjust, I can make really good progress doing this, and then I can have a ton of fun, right, with my athletes. But one of the things that you see, especially younger coaches, and I think even I had a little bit of this like switch when I was switching over from the super specific to almost like nothing matters. It's like training kind of gets nihilistic then, and it's like, okay, like nothing matters, nothing matters. So like, what are your principles to stay away from nothing matters and still like approach the gym with some great intensity and showing up? Like what makes you show up in that principle regard?
I mean, I'm big on I'm not married to methods. Like I'm not going to be very specific on you have to do this specific method in order to get better. I'm very principle based, like I've said already. So like there's also a saying in the strength and conditioning world, especially like the Division 1 levels, like if you're married to methods, be prepared to get divorced from your job because that method may not work at every single university. And if you go do an interview and go, this is what I do, that university might go, you're not for us then because we don't do that here. You might be a great coach, but you don't fit us because you're so set on that method. And that's not what I believe in, whether that be using Olympic lifts for everything. And you go to a school where they don't believe in doing Olympic lifts. So now you're not a fit for that program. So for me, it's like I'm not married to any methods, but what I'm going to do is we're going to sprint, we're going to jump, and we're going to lift things heavy and lift things fast. Those are the 4 things that we are going to do. And the specifics on how we do all of that is going to be based on one, what can you buy in and what do you enjoy doing? And what's also going to move the needle towards getting measurable results for whatever it is that we need to do. But those 4 things are always going to be in the program. Maybe an aspect of one is going to be more emphasized than another based on what the need is. So if you need to get stronger, maybe we don't do as much of the sprints, but we just keep touches of it in there while we're focusing on getting a little bit stronger. If you need to get faster, maybe we're not lifting max effort lifts on things while we're trying to also get faster. Maybe we need to put a little bit more emphasis on the plyometrics, or maybe we need to just go throw med balls or just lift heavier weight, like whatever it might be. Those 4 like pillars of my training will always be there, but the aspect of what's going to be the focus on the other is going to dictate how we're going to develop a program based around what needs you're going to need in order to get better at whatever it is that we're trying to get better at.
Fuck yeah, dude. That's a beautiful elevator pitch right there. I'm sold. What's the I know you're a huge proponent of Oli lifting, and then one of the things that you said though is that you're not married to methods. So what is your method of lifting weight fast without the Oli method? Like is it kind of like that Conjugate West Side's like dynamic effort style? Like how would you approach it with Olis versus without Olis?
With Olis, that's an easy approach for me. Like I have my progressions for power cleans and like most people I won't even introduce the snatch to depending on like their comfort level and their if they even want to learn it or specifics on their injury history or going overhead or stuff like that. Like the snatch might be a secondary benefit of doing the Olis, but like I have my clean progression. I'm very comfortable. Like I can get anybody to learn a clean in 15, 20 minutes, and then that will be in the program forever. If I'm not using Olympic lifts, I view Olympic lifts as a variation of just moving heavy load fast. and what other variations can we do that are going to allow us to move heavy load fast. Some guys want to do a trap bar jump. Great. Is it the exact same? No, but we're moving something heavy. We're getting our feet off the ground. We're moving it fast. That's going to be able to check the box of what we're trying to do. Maybe I need to complex something because they're having a hard time moving heavy load fast. So maybe we go from like moderate to heavy compound movement into a plyometric or into a throw or something else that's going to help develop qualities of what a clean can develop, but they're just not at the level of wanting to doing cleans, or they can't complete the movement adequately enough or whatever it might be. So if you look at what the clean is, moving heavy load externally fast, how do we substitute that? Well, what's another heavy load that we can move fast, whether it be a squat jump, whether it be a trap bar jump or shrug, whether it be X, Y, like whatever it might be. It doesn't matter specifically, but that's just something that will be there is this moving heavy external load quickly. We'll find out the movement that works best for you, and then we're just going to stick with that and get better at it if we can.
Dude, and I just brought up that question just to show, I was hoping it went this direction, just to show how easy it is to have that substitute when your principle is in place, right? Like you have a strong principle in place of like move heavy load quick. And it's like, okay, how do we do that? The easiest way is Ollie's, right? Okay, you don't want Ollie's, then we go here. If you don't want that, but then we go here, right? And again, that is one of the, because I get the question a lot with the variety that I have in the program is like, how do you keep everything? It's like, it's actually way easier. Like if you have your principle set, it's really easy to have the variety in the program and to have the adjustability. It's just, I think a lot of times, and the reason I know this is because, like, especially as a young coach, when I was in like, I started coaching a little bit when I was in high school or when I was in college, and I would go back and coach my high school, and I would help out there and I would do some internships. And when you don't have those principles in place and then you see all the variety, that shit's stressful as fuck. It's like, goddamn, like, I don't know where to plug and play everything, but as soon as you have that principle in place, it's a simple checklist. Like it's just going down that list, and you can come up with any variation. You can have a dude with one arm and one leg, and come up with a variation of them to move the weight like heavyweight quickly.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just with the old, like you could do that with every one of those pillars. Like whether it's a strength movement, I would love to do the back squat. Maybe you don't want to do back squat. All right, can we do a hack squat? Nope, you don't want to do a hack squat. All right, we'll do a leg press. Like whatever it's going to allow us to move the most amount of weight with our legs, we're going to choose that variation. So I have my ideal method that I would like to do, but if that method doesn't work, I also have method number 2, method number 3, method number 4 that will also work because all we're really trying to do is move something heavy with our legs. I don't care how it's going to be done. We can still progress it. We can still overload that from week to week, however we need to. So that's a great example. Like if it's principle based, like you said, it's extremely easy to write these things out. Like you just go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There's the program, and now we're done.
Yeah. All right. This is a question that I kind of get a lot too, and I've seen. I'm sure you see it all the time. It's like you have an output warrior. You have somebody that's really good in the weight room, and probably even like a lot of times when they're good in the weight room, they're decent at like XLs or just straight line sprints. But they move like they're fucking stiff, bro. Like they can't move super well. What in your principle and what in your programming? Like when you have that like fucking locked up athlete, the athlete that just in a, maybe it's not a bit like bendy's the term in football that you hear a lot where they're like you have a bendy athlete or a locked up athlete. What's kind of the principle in the program? How do you approach an athlete like that where they just don't move that well?
Get them to move, get them used to moving, get them moving in ways that are maybe outside of what they're great at. So if they're a great linear sprinter, but they're not great laterally, let's start working in some like more lateral movements, whether it's curved runs, whether it's multi-directional runs, something that's going to get them used to acceleration, deceleration back into an acceleration so they can work on moving their center of mass through space. Usually when they're locked up, they're really hard at moving their center of mass through multiple planes at one time. They're really good in one direction or the other. Another great way would be just get them out, give them a med ball, give them 5 different directions that they need to throw this med ball, and we're going to throw that med ball 10 times in each one of these directions. So we could do rotational throws, overhead backwards, under legs forward, get them moving in different directions and different things that maybe we can't do in the weight room, but we can still get them to express force in different directions just so they're comfortable expressing force differently than just forward, back, up, and down, which is what a lot of the weight room stuff is going to end up being. And then it also is going to come into like explaining and getting them to buy in. It's like, look, if you can just loosen up a little bit, this is probably going to end up feeling better for you. So how we're going to loosen you up is we're going to get out, we're going to do some shit that you probably aren't going to think is going to be very beneficial. It might feel weird, but it's getting you to move better, and becoming a better mover essentially is going to help you become a better athlete.
Dude, and that's the thing. Like I show, and I've realized like I've probably too much of the movement variability stuff, like just showing it. But it's like it's maybe 10 minutes a day, and it makes a world of difference. Like it doesn't have to be your entire program. And like we're still doing all of the like move heavy shit, sprint, jump, like all the important stuff. And then you just sprinkle in a little bit of the variety. Like even if it is like throwing a med ball in a different direction, like you would be absolutely shocked if you have an athlete do that for 3 weeks, how much you can get an athlete to loosen up. Like the first time they rotated their spine, like at all, throwing a med ball, you're like, dude, what the fuck were you doing before? Like it was just straight powerlifting, and you get them to move just a little bit. Like, dude, I feel amazing. This is the best program ever. And it's like, no, it's not, dude. It's literally you just moved in a different direction for the first time in 6 years.
One of my first programs that I wrote back when I was coaching the high school kids is a lot of these kids had that problem. They just didn't have coordination. Like I had 15, 16, 17-year-old kids who this was the first time they've ever like trained for sport. So they're trying to get better at playing football. These guys were just bad movers. So at one point for an entire summer, we had med ball Wednesdays. We didn't lift a single weight the whole session. We would just go out and we were throwing a ball around, and we're trying to like we'd play games with the med ball where we're trying to compete with who can throw, like who can go over the left shoulder the furthest, and who can go over the right shoulder the furthest, who can rotate to the right and throw this ball the furthest. Like we would just have competitions like that, and then we would play games where it's like we would be in like a 5-yard box, and we're throwing a light med ball back and forth, and we're seeing who, like we're trying to catch the ball, rotate, and toss it at the next person. And the goal was to make them drop the ball or to hit them with the ball so they couldn't catch it. So like not only are you now looking at rotating and throwing, but you're looking at recognizing some sort of thing coming at you, being able to identify it and position your body into a position where you can now accept it, catch it, throw it back at somebody else. And that kind of stuff, just doing that for a summer, these guys became so much better just being loose. And you could see like the difference if you've coached a lot of athletes, like a stiff athlete, when they run, their shoulders are tight, they're not moving. There's no kind of like flow with the spine. There's no kind of flow with how they run. That's how a lot of them were after a summer of doing just simple stuff like playing games and getting outside of what their normal movement patterns were. All of them started moving a lot better. They looked like injuries were down. People said they felt better. And like you were saying, they're like, this is the best program ever. It's like, no, we're just not doing stuff that you've done before. And it's fun.
Well, and I think that's part of the problem too, is that a lot of the movement stuff, and obviously there's people that have bastardized the movement stuff too, like the full movement yogis too, which I like. It gives it a bad taste 100%. But it's also like a lot of the benefits of the movement stuff are subjective, right? Rather than the objective stuff in the weight room, and that's really what I've in the probably the past 3 years switched more of like trying to balance the objective data with the subjective to where like okay, you subjectively feel better, and I got your results. Like, and we got all of this stuff, right? And so like then they're a little bit more bought in, or the parents a little bit more bought in, or you just have somebody to like show that. But I think that's a reason why all of the movement stuff is so like frowned upon in a lot of the circles, is that it is subjective, and I think a lot of coaches, honestly, in the strength conditioning field, have a little bit of the autism, and they're like so focused on the object. And that's it's an amazing skill set to have. Like it's just brain super powered on numbers, right? Like, and if there's not a number attached to it, it doesn't mean anything. But it's like, okay, like is that really the sport that you're preparing them for, right? And I think having a little bit of the balance of that subjective quality, having some sort of subjective KPI, or just being all right with a little bit of a looser subjective KPI there with your athletes. And a lot of it's just a conversation with the athletes too, where you're saying like they'll come to you and say they feel better. Or again, I think watching the sprints a really beautiful one too, like you were saying, or watching them move in a game. It's like you can tell night and day, like the athlete that is just comes in and locks like completely stiff up to where like they're actually rotating and moving and feeling a little bit more bouncy.
Dude, it's once you see it and them starting to sprint and you start to see that there's a flow to it, you're just like, oh my God, it's happening. Like this guy is going to feel so much better and he's going to move so much better. Especially like in a football game, you would get these guys, like younger guys, mostly when I was coaching with the football team, is they would start running down the field and it looks like their shoulder pad was just connected to their helmet and it would not move. There was no sort of anything happening from here. Like they had a giant neck pad on, but they actually didn't. They just ran straight and stiff. And you see that kind of loosening up to where like now there's like a flow when they're sprinting and they can kind of make moves a little bit better and just like, ah, shit's working. They're having fun. Everything is going the way it's supposed to go. And that's when like that buy-in starts to become solidified. And it also makes it a lot easier to introduce some sort of a new method later on down the road if you want. Because be like, hey, remember when we started throwing these med balls around? Now we're going to do this because this is going to help. They're going to be like, cool, I'm in. Because last thing we did worked. I'm bought in and I'm going to have fun with this as well. So the movement aspect of stuff, I think is great. With all the, I do think there's a bastardized version of it on Instagram, and I think it's absolutely terrible. Like functional patterns, I think is one of
Yeah.
the stupidest things I've ever seen. But it's there and it exists, and I'm sure the people that do it feel great and they're bought in. So cool, have fun doing functional patterns. But the way that they portray it, where it's like, I got this person to stop moving like this, and now they're actually flowing. So now you should do it to become an NFL athlete. It's like, no, that's not how it works. But like the stuff that you post with like your dudes playing basketball or you're like making up these games to play, I'm like, dude, that's movement training right there. Like get them outside of the weight room and get them outside of their sport and explore just different ways to figure out a problem and get that problem done. And you can make that a game, whether it's playing basketball with a certain specific set of rules where now you have to move differently, or like the spike ball variations you guys play, or hopping over the hurdle and then having a roll and do a broad jump or whatever it might be. Is like that's how you create good movers, is by getting them to move outside of patterns that they're so used to doing that it challenges them now to be more coordinated, to be able to experience some sort of pattern that they're not used to, solve this problem, and how can I get this highest broad jump or furthest broad jump after doing a front somersault.
When you personally program this for your clients, what does like a day of programming look like to make sure like you're hitting it? Is it always like I know you mentioned like med ball Wednesdays? Is it always just a movement day in there, or do you use like part of like your lifting variations as part of that movement variability, part of your jumping variations as part of your sprinting variations? Like how does that look like in a day, like a day of your programming to like sprinkle in some of those aspects? Where would you put that in your programming?
A lot of that comes through the jumping and the sprints. So I'll sometimes program specific warm-ups that are going to get them outside of like just moving straight forward and back. The jump variations, sometimes I got this from when Will and I collabed on a program. I stole a bunch of this and started putting it in the programs where it's like, look, we're going to do 15 minutes of jumping. Every jump has to be from a different approach than the previous jump. And you're going to be trying to get as high as you can. And then I would make a demonstration video of it where I'm standing and the box is behind me. I have to do a 180 turn before I jump onto the box. And then the next time I have to turn the opposite direction. Or maybe now I have to do like a lateral shuffle into a box jump, or try to jump over the box or whatever it might be. Because I'm limited to the fact that like I'm not with these people in person. Most of my, like 99.9% of my clients are going to be online. So I've got to find out broad ways that can be adaptable for anybody in any gym. So doing something like that, where it's like spend 10 minutes jumping over a box, every jump needs to be a different approach than the previous jump. That's going to challenge them to figure out and be creative and find new ways to maybe make it over this box or do something like that. Or like in a warm up, I might put in more lateral movement for my warm up prior to doing accelerations versus just like the A skips and the marches and all that kind of stuff before we go into a sprint session.
Yeah, dude. To me, I'm very much the same way. Obviously, Will and I have a lot of similarities in our programming, where it's like the more you can leave that open, like it's tough to box into creativity, right? You know, like it's like kind of an oxymoron there. And like to me, it's like you just got to give them some sort of structure, which is okay. It's a jump, right? Like that's the only structure we got. Now you figure out how to jump, or like it's a jump over this certain amount of height, or a jump for this certain amount of time, and then you come up with the variations. And you would be, it's so much fun watching the athletes like work on that, and it keeps them engaged in the workout. Like that's another thing that I think about. It's like especially athletes, like it gets a little different when you have the adult world, but what I've realized with high school and college athletes is like they're told specifically what to do all day every day. And like when it gets to college, especially like a Division 1 college athlete, it's like their days are programmed for them 10 minutes at a time. You know, like it's like this is what we're doing here, this is what we're doing here, and you give them like 15 minutes at the start of a session to just like pick what they want to do. And they're like, they don't know what to do with their hands. They're like, what do you mean?
Dude, they're Will Ferrell and Anchorman.
Yeah, dude, you're like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, jump over that box different way? Like, what do you want me to do a certain way? Like, no, like you do it, and like that's one of the cool pieces. Like when I see it, the athletes, like when they start to be creative themselves, they start to come up with new ideas, and they stop with this like, did I do it right, Daddy? You know, like where they start, you know, that look where they look at you like, it was like, dude, I don't know, did you? Like, what'd you feel there? This is your body, this is your program, like take some control over it. Like I should not be here holding your hand for everything.
Yeah, I get that a lot too. Through like my programs. I'll get videos from people and they'll be like, "Did you do this right?" And I'm like, "You didn't do it wrong." Like so yeah, you did do it right.
That's it. I'm stealing that answer, dude. You didn't do it wrong, and that's all we can ask for. Okay. Last question of the podcast. I wanted to ask this to you on the Meathead Roundtable, but we addressed the state of the field with the boys, right? What do you think is the biggest thing we need to change in our field? I need you to address the strength conditioning field right now. Like if you were running for president in the strength conditioning field, what do we need to make changes on?
Man, that's a tough one because I can look at the field from two aspects. Like I never went the Division 1 route because I quickly learned that that's not what I want to do. Like when I was playing football, saw our strength coaches in the weight room and that was their life and that's all they ever did. And I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. But I have so many friends who are at Power 4 schools at the highest level. Like one of my good friends that is at Ohio State. They're about to play for the national championship. And I've also have so many friends in the private sector and see the vast difference that those two people have to follow, where one guy's literally trying to do everything he can just not to get fired, and one guy's doing everything he can to like support his business and to get results for his athletes. But as a whole, the strength and conditioning field, I think, just needs to loosen up and realize that we're probably not as important as we think we are, but we do play a role in developing athletes to make them better. There's got to be some sort of a balance where it's like you got to treat strength and conditioning like a buffet, and you got to be able to go and pick and choose the things that you like and realize that not everything that you like is going to be something that someone else is like or someone else likes, and not everything that someone else likes is going to be something that you like. And we got to be okay with people just doing different shit and getting results as well and working together as a whole to bring up the strength and conditioning community from a professional side. But I mean, I don't even know if I just answered the question or not, but that's a tough one because like I said, like there's so it's such a vast community and there's so many people that have different aspects within that strength and conditioning community. But yeah, I'm leaning towards like I said, like with kind of rejecting the sports science side of things and realizing that like that's not as important. It also kind of makes me realize is like strength and conditioning as a whole is not on the pedestal that people think it is. And I think if we realize that we can take our jobs as serious as we need to, and we can still get the results that we need to, but it's not going to be like a do or die. Like I have to, man, I'm drawing a blank when I try to say this, but like, it's not like a do or die of like, I have to do X, Y, and Z to get my athletes to be better or to save my job because I'm trying to please somebody else. Find what works for you, double down on what you like to do, progress as a professional in the field, whether or not it's the exact route that you thought it was going to be, cool. But I don't know. Like for me, that's a tough one because I'm on the outside and I don't really pay attention to a lot of it. Like I'm in my own world. I know what I like to do. I know how I like to program. I don't give a shit if somebody agrees with me or not because I have a lot of experience and I know what I do works. But I also realize it's like what I do for most people is probably 10% of what their life is going to end up needing in terms of like them being an athlete. The rest of it comes down to can they go out and do everything else they need to do to become a better athlete or whatever it might be. But I would be an awful president with this answer, to be honest. I'm more of like a speaker of the house type of person when it comes to this.
Well, the one thing that I realize is like
I
coming
feel like
so,
I said a lot there, but I didn't say anything.
oh no, I got some good points there that I like that you said where it's like for me when I was at the Division 1 route coaching, it's like I was so fucking handcuffed and I was so nervous like all the time of like pleasing other people and thinking other than just fucking working with the athletes in front of me, dude. And it's like this is another thing. It's like I think so many coaches handcuff themselves to be the sports scientist because it's what's hireable now. It's like people are scared to inspire other people. People are scared to look like a meathead. People are scared to like, and it's like, dude, like you could do your job so much better if people just fucking believed in you, like just as a person. Like you're gonna get better results regardless of the program you follow because you can get people to believe in you because you look the part, you have a fucking personality, you're able to talk to people, right? Like you're able to educate people. And I think a lot of like when it gets to the college world, especially when I was in it, like that was frowned upon. You would have been frowned upon. I was frowned upon. Like people
100%.
like Will are like frowned upon. It's like why? Because they look the part, because they inspire people, like because they talk against some of the science that's not science. Like we're handcuffing ourselves, and the handcuff doesn't affect you; it affects your athletes, right? Like, and that's the thing that drives me fucking insane. Is like then they wrap it up in this like virtue signal of they're doing the science for the athletes. No, the fuck you're not. You're doing the science for
For
the
your
admin
job.
above you to keep your job, to please the coaches, to look like a professional. It has nothing to do with the athletes in front of you. Like, and I'm like that's the part that really drives me nuts. It's like you do the kind of the shady thing a little bit, right? And whatever, like you have to keep your job, whatever. Like if yeah, that's why you're doing it, just say that's why you're doing it. But then they wrap it up in this weird message of like it's all for the athlete. That's why I'm doing this force plate data. That's why I'm just like, you're not. That's not true. That's not true at all.
And I think that's part of the reason why I've recently started rejecting like the science part of stuff. It's not that I don't believe that there's a benefit from it, is that it is rooted in the person conducting the science that's measuring the data, that's doing all of this because they want to seem important to keep their job or to be valuable to an organization or whatever it might be. And it puts them on that pedestal of, I know everything because the science is backing me up and I've measured thousands of athletes and this is what my data is showing me versus like you were saying, like the guys who just go and work hard and get shit done, those guys are frowned upon because it's like, look, you just all you're doing is lifting heavy and you're sprinting and stuff. It's like, yeah, but guys are getting stronger and they're getting faster. If they
I'm doing my
suck at,
job.
yeah, if they suck at football, that's not my job to worry about them sucking at football. But if I can back up everything I'm saying by just focusing on the data and just doing what the data is telling me to do, now I just have a leg to stand on and go like, look, this is why I should keep my job because not only did we just lift heavy and get faster, but now the force plate's telling me that my guys are producing 30% more newtons on the force plate when we do our counter movement jump from week to week and we progress that. And like that's why I kind of reject the science side of stuff is like the science has taken place of the experience of getting results, but also like the experience of being a coach. And part of being a coach is focusing on the athlete, not focusing on the data that that athlete is producing and essentially moving that athlete to the side and just looking at them as a data point on, X, Y, and Z measurable.
Yeah, dude. And again, if that's what you have to do to keep your job and you actually do a good job, fucking do it. Like I'm not against it. I just don't like if you have to run them through a force plate thing once a week for 5 minutes, whatever. Like go and do it. I do not like the post hoc wrapping it up into what you're talking about, or like, yeah, but I increased 30% Newton. Like I did all this stuff. It's like, yeah, dude, like that's not why you actually did it, right? Like that's not the point of that actual exercise. And I, it's much more common, especially like being in the Division 1 sector than you would ever imagine. Like ever imagine. It's all just spreadsheets to people that pay you. And that's why I love the private sector though. Like I really do. I really do believe the private sector has made me a significantly better coach because the people that pay me are the athletes. And if I'm not giving them an experience, if I'm not getting them results, I'm fired. Whereas at the Division 1 level, I legitimately could have been the worst coach of all time as long as I pleased the right people. It didn't matter. It did not matter the experience my athletes had. It did not matter like anything there. Like the only review that mattered was, did these three people like me? Did these three people feel like I provided like value? And that's all that mattered. And that to me, it just felt like so empty. It's like all of these athletes love me, but this one guy doesn't like me, right? And now I need to go make this one guy like me, and I'm spending energy on one guy that I'm not coaching, that isn't playing a sport, that is a grown ass man that can't handle his emotion. Like that's everything. Why am I spending energy there? Why am I not just spending energy with people that want to be here and do that? And that's why I've loved the transition to the private sector. And I know not everybody's going to transition to the private sector. I just think there's a better way to do the collegiate sector, whereas like your clients should be the people in front of you, and it's going to lead to a better result on the field. That's like, you know what I mean? Like if the school actually wants to win, your clients should be the athletes that you're working with.
Then on the flip side of that, I had a old high school friend who was a strength coach at University of Washington last year. They made it to the national championship game. It was like one of the best seasons UW has had in forever. They ended up losing in the national championship game. The whole strength staff got fired. And they did their job right. And the reason they got fired is because they didn't please the right person, and the right person wanted to bring in somebody else. So it doesn't even matter sometimes. Like you could be doing your job to a T and getting the results. Players are getting better. UW that year ended up having a lot of guys end up getting drafted, going to the league, and they're all playing now. But they lost their job still because it's not about the athlete. Like if you look at it from just a plain perspective of X and Y, like did strength coach get athlete better? Did athlete provide wins for the team? Did that end up translating into a successful season? That part is a yes. Did strength coach do exactly what admin wanted them to do? No, you're fired. We'll
Yep.
bring someone else in that's going to do exactly what I want to do. So then I could be happy about my job being an admin. And then all you have to worry about is making me happy, and you could be here for as long as you'd like.
Dude, I've also heard situations where it's the same situation where they lost a game and the football coach like literally told the strength coach, he's like, I'm gonna have to throw you under the bus, otherwise I'm fired. And like if I'm fired, all of my coaches are fired. And like the strength coach just has to accept it and be like, yeah, our like so then the football coach just goes like, yeah, our athletes weren't bigger or stronger, so I gotta fire this guy and bring in a new strength coach. It's like some of the stories I've heard in the Division 1 world are absolutely fucking bonkers, dude.
Dude, that's what that data comes from is like, I feel like 70 to 80% of the reason why they're collecting so much data on their athletes is so they can not only try to like solidify their job and not get fired, but if they do get fired, now they have a resume for when they go and apply to the next job.
Yeah.
Be like, look, I know I got fired from the last place, but if you look at what we did, I actually got them all better. We just lost a certain game and everyone got fired, but I know how to do my job. Like that's another reason why they have all these data points is it's not about the athlete. It's about them being able to secure their job or secure the next job because they could win everything and still lose their job the next year. Like
Yeah.
the Division 1 level is absolutely ruthless. And seeing it from like, I've seen my friends, like one of my best friends, the one who's at Ohio State, he's been collegiate strength coach for 10 years almost, and he's been at 7 different schools.
Crazy.
It's insane.
Imagine moving that many times, dude, for the strength conditioning job.
Dude, it's brutal. That's like being private sector and like working the way that I do is so much better. And like you said, I feel like it does make me a better coach because now my client is my boss. So if I don't get the results and if they're not happy with what I'm doing, they will fire me. And essentially,
They fire me, yes.
I am now making less money because I can't get my results. So I need to make sure that I do a really good job at whatever it is that I do because the person who is paying me is not only now technically my boss, but they're also the ones that I need to get better. So it's a direct line of contact, a direct relationship of I'm here for you. You're my boss. You're not just my client. So I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that you are going to get as good as you can or see the progress that you want to see. And I do think private sector provides that, and it does make coaches exponentially better than if they're in the professional sector.
Hell yeah, dude. I totally agree. I appreciate you coming on, dude. This is awesome. This was a long time coming. I'm excited that we finally got the time zone figured out and got it done.
Yeah, it's been too long. I mean, the first time we talked about it was like probably 8, 9 months ago. We're
A
like, we need
long
to do a
time ago.
podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say it was a while ago. And then I stopped doing the podcast like a bum. And then Tristan, the producer. So the reason he hopped on was I was being a bum, and he's like, dude, you got to keep putting out the podcast. I love it. I'm like, dude, if you want me to keep putting it out, you got to produce it. Because, like, I hate editing. I despise editing, dude. Like, hey, even for YouTube videos, like, I love recording. I love shooting. But, like, editing and putting it together drives me insane. I hate that, like cutting pieces of art. I'm like, you have to do it. He's like, fine. You got me. I'm like, hell yeah. So now we're back. We're rolling. But I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you crushing with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you guys for listening. Keep chopping wood.
Thank you for listening. Join us next week as we dive down another rabbit hole. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. Follow us on Instagram at Austin Yoakum to stay updated on future podcast guests. Keep chopping wood.